Sprint 1.8 review. Let's get started. So today, John Prause is going to go over the sprint statistics, the community update, and Tina's going to do the automate, Harpreet the UI, Adam providers, Joe the platform, and Suyog documentation. Next slide. So we had 285 PRs merged this past sprint, and integration tests jumped in there and took the lead, which is usually Classic and ManageIQ is in the lead. So, and you can see we had a big jump here. So we're up to 285 PRs merged, as I said before, and we had 293 opened and closed just as many. So that's a pretty good sign. We also released Hammer 4, as you see there. And as I said before, tests took the lion's share there. So that jumped ahead of the bugs and enhancements. And as far as the health report, everything kind of looks like it typically does. There's nothing that stands out per se. So that's a good sign. Okay, for the community update, Hammer 4 was released, as I said. And for the last month in ManageIQ, Drew wrote up a very interesting pathfinding blog entry. So if you want to find out what that is, read up. Next slide. Over to Tina.
Thanks, John. Good morning. We had 9 PRs merged this sprint. Fabian exposed the vert V2V wrapper error message in the progress state, replacing the generic disk transformation failed error message. Billy Fitz modified the cloud and infer VM retirement class email schema entries to point to the new consolidated class instances. Drew resolved an Ansible service retirement issue where the service resources were getting retired when the service was configured to retain the resources. As part of ongoing Automate Engine enhancements, Drew made a change to Automate Engine to dynamically expose service model associations. And finally, Lucy completed back-end work to add the ability to optionally specify a zone when creating service items. That's it for Automate. Next slide, and over to Harpreet.
Thanks, Tina. Hello, everyone. We had a total of 63 UI PRs merged across all of the UI repos. Out of that, 22 were bug fixes, 7 enhancements, and so on. We had quite a few PRs merged that dealt with refactoring and cleanup of trees. And on the bug fixes, I have listed a few of them here. A fix was made in Services Explorer, so user can access child services from a parent service. This broke during last sprint when the tree was removed from the left panel. Then the servers by roles tree under diagnostics in Configuration Explorer was fixed to pre-select a server node on initial load. Cloud Networks add edit form was fixed to mark segmentation ID and physical network fields as required fields. Previously, those were not marked as required, so after user pressed add or edit buttons, it would display a message stating that required data was not provided. A fix was made on provisioning form to prevent an error when associated template is not found. Also, there were a couple of fixes made in the dialog editor. If a field is marked as an optional field, a fix was made to not validate the format of data when field is empty. Another fix was made in the same area to initialize load values on init switch properly. In some situations, it was showing up as halfway selected. Next slide, please. And on the enhancement side, Richard worked on redesigning the breadcrumbs to make them consistent all over the product. Martin P. has a couple of slides to go over that. And the backend support was added to toggle the volume size field on Cloud Volume Editor. Previously, this was being done based upon the type of provider, so some cleanup of code there. Enable and disable schedule buttons were added to schedule summary screen. Earlier, we only had those buttons available only on the list view screens. And on the V2V side, conversion host enablement list view screens now has retry button. Migration plan wizard VM step now displays VM folder information. And finally, status detail has been added to info pop-up on a migration task. Next slide, please. So here you can see a retry button on the left side on each host, on each conversion host. So when you click on that, it pops up a modal that prompts user to re-enter the SSH key, and then they can retry. Next slide, please. On the VM step here, the columns were rearranged and the folder column is added. Show the path of a VM, and also now you can filter on the data center and the folder columns. Next slide, please. Over to Martin P.
Yeah, okay, so Ricard could not come, so I'm going to talk about his work on the breadcrumbs. This work was started during his internship. It's actually his second task. The first one was implementing all the tests for all the textual summary or detail pages. So there were several reasons why we decided to redo the breadcrumbs. For once, the old breadcrumbs did not behave consistently. It was a mix of user history and hierarchical navigation. It was different in various parts of the project, and it was a source of disease. So based on consultations with the UX, we decided to follow the PF patterns and redo the breadcrumbs as hierarchical navigation. The breadcrumbs show where the user is within the app, not how he got there. So that's the hierarchical breadcrumbs. So moving forward, we are going to also remove the history toolbar. It has no support in the pattern fly. The history toolbar and the breadcrumbs were an area of chaos and technical depth. So by removing it, we will also improve the maintainability of the UI. The old breadcrumbs were inconsistent also in appearance, and in that they were not present on every screen. The new breadcrumbs, on the contrary, are present on every single page and show the same type of information. So no more inconsistency. Next slide, please. So in the picture, you can see the old breadcrumbs. As you can notice, there are two basic problems: the position of the breadcrumbs and that they do not show the whole path. So here's an example of the inconsistency. When a user is going back to the show list page, the breadcrumbs are completely missing. In other places, the breadcrumbs used to contain links to other controllers that the user visited before. Next slide. So in this picture, you can see the new breadcrumbs. There is the whole path to where we are in the app. And the breadcrumbs are always in the same place in every screen of ManageIQ. It creates a consistency which improves the user experience in our application. And now it's a React component. That's all I have. Thank you. Next slide.
All right, thanks, Martin. So this sprint, the OpenStack team led the number of merged PRs with 10, followed by a three-way tie with Overt, Ansible Tower, and Amazon. Next slide. The OpenStack team added support to extend cloud volume on the back end. This is also added to the UI, as Harpreet covered. They fixed parsing of OSP events coming from different time zones. Time zones are a constant problem. There was a non-friendly error message when you tried to connect to an invalid OSP endpoint. I believe this was if you're trying to connect with SSL, but it was a non-SSL endpoint. It gave you an error message and you couldn't tell what was wrong. They also fixed an action to set the ironic power state of an OSP host. And along with all the other providers, they updated the Travis versions of Ruby that we're testing. For Ansible Tower, there was a fix to the Tower client gem to fix an issue on Ruby 2.5 where there was an extra trailing slash added, which was breaking all the VCR tests. So that was actually a fix in the Tower client that allowed us to test 2.5 on Ansible Tower. Next slide. On the Overt side, they fixed disk removal through the UI. Last sprint, they fixed it through the API, but apparently there was something else that the UI was doing slightly differently than when it was being removed from the through the API, and so they fixed that this sprint. And on VMware, Brian added a check to prevent disk removal if a VM had snapshots and return a helpful error message, so it wouldn't fail later on. And that's it. Over to Joe for platform.
Thank you, Adam. So for this sprint, 16 PRs were merged into the platform space, the highlights of which are: Julian continued the Ruby version upgrade effort across multiple MIQ repos. The platform-related PRs are listed here on the slide. Also included here as a suggestion from Julian is a link to the ManageIQ talk article about this effort. Nick M made a change to our continuous integration testing to have it start failing when we stop supporting pre-2.5x versions of Ruby, and this should give us an indication for when we are past affected versions. For refactoring, Nick C moved Postgres HA admin to the ManageIQ password gem, and Keenan made a change to simplify the ManageIQ worker server scope. Next slide, please. Just need to get my next slide to go. There we go. For enhancements, Keenan made a change that will speed up access when fetching services through the API. Libor improved chargeback reports by adding the report interval date and report generation. And Joar continued the ongoing effort to improve our test infrastructure by requiring the API client gem before attempting to use it, which will avoid some sporadic test failures. For bug fixes, Keenan fixed a bug where the displaying of large lists of services would time out. And he did this by running the subquery once for every row on the screen rather than every row in the base table. Libor fixed a bug by ensuring the MIQ filter belongs to object method would include data for network providers. And Yuri fixed an issue where audit event success messages were being logged if an invocation failed. And that's it for the provider space. On to the next slide in documentation.
Hi, for documentation, only a few updates in the sprint. We had 12 PRs merged, of which 2 were enhancements and 10 were bugs. We have removed references to the ha_admin.log file in the HA guide, and there were a few smaller bug fixes and other screenshot updates to match the latest UI. And that's it for documentation.
Okay, that ends Sprint 108 review, and the next one is on April 17th. See you then.